Creative power is what moves the world, and Creative Conversations with Irene is a podcast series that offers insight and inspiration on how to thrive in the core essence of who you are as a woman. I'm your host, Irene Chong, and it thrills my heart to see more women awaken and come alive to your feminine intelligence. Listen in for soul and strategy to create your best life ever. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us on social media to receive updates on new episodes. So Daven and I, we first connected on a recent event that I hosted, the Take Up Space Summit. And Daven, I've been following your work for a while now, and I just absolutely love your grounded, open presence, as well as what I feel is a lot of creative passion that you bring to the work that you do. And one little tidbit that I like to share with the audience is that, and this is the behind the scenes that participants don't always get to see. Daven was actually the very first speaker that I interviewed for that summit. And, what an amazing interview that turned out to be. Not only, as I recall, not only did we show up with no prior coordination whatsoever, but we came wearing matching colors. And I also felt that we hit it off really well and connected in a very genuine and real way. And so I feel that you carry this presence with you that makes it very easy to open up to, that's very genuine. Then the other thing I wanted to share is that I was also very impressed with the work that you put into the creation of your Oracle deck, which I have right here with me. And first of all, I just want to say congratulations on this astounding achievement. I'm sure it took a lot of time, a lot of energy, and I want to hear all about the creative process that went behind this, because I'm sure that the audience is curious, especially if they themselves are thinking of birthing a creative project, manifesting a dream. Like, what is it like? What are some of the challenges and what are some of the fun bits? Right? So having said all that, I just want to say that I'm very excited to welcome you once again as my very first guest on this podcast series that I am putting out.
Oh, thank you, Irene. I am thrilled to help initiate this beautiful being into the world of your podcast. So thank you.
Great. So let's just dive right in. And as you know, this podcast series is all about inspiring women to create the amazing life they desire and deserve. And I know that you often share that your work is sourced from your own journey. So I thought that maybe a lovely way to begin will be to have you share more about your creative journey in giving birth to your Power of the Yin Oracle deck. So share with us what first inspired you to commit to this labor of love. What were some of the birth pangs you experienced? And also, what tools did you use to support you in the creation of this gorgeous deck of cards?
Great questions. Thank you. The birth of these cards came from something very practical, which is a mentor and coach of mine asking me, what could I guarantee my clients who work with me? So my work is called The Power of the Yin. And I coach women one-on-one. I take them through private programs. I teach workshops, things like that. And to me, that was a very confronting question because in some sense, I can't guarantee anything. The clients who come to me are fully responsible for their own experience. But on the other hand, it really activated a sense of responsibility and a showing up in me that I know she was calling me towards. So while I didn't have a ready answer to her question, it prompted me to start really sketching out in a very creative way what it is I guarantee my clients that they will experience as they explore the power of their yin. And as I serve as a guide to the power of the yin, aspects of power that they may not recognize as power, things like sensitivity or stillness or the veils part, connecting with the invisible realms. And So as I sketched this out, it was a kind of a mind map. It had circles and lines of things connecting. And then it also started to look like a map to a journey that had a destination. And the destination was home. And this is where you are the divine. This is where you become the priestess of your own religion, honestly, your own practice. And this is home. You've arrived home to your true self. And I was really struck by this journey and the path that it created, and how it formed itself so beautifully and so much more completely than I realized, how many components and all that I was bringing to my work. And the idea for the cards came very suddenly and simply, where I was heading out for a walk. I think it may have been within a week or so of creating that mind map. And the idea came to my mind that this would make an incredible oracle deck, because unlike writing a book about this, the oracle deck is an interactive, it's really a tool that helps you embody experiences, concepts. And the thought that someone who is wanting to connect with the power of their yin, but they don't know how, they don't even know what that means. What does that mean? In a way, it's an oxymoron, power, yin. We don't usually associate those words together. We don't associate the subtle with power. We associate, the outward intensity with power. And so if someone can pull a card on a given day and get a card like mystery, and receive this card within the context of mystery is actually a power. And if you can be in relationship with mystery, if you can trust the mystery, you are connecting to a deeper power that will support you in everything that you do. So that was the concept. And the other thing that immediately sprang to mind when I thought of an oracle deck is both my parents are artists. I come from a very creative upbringing. My internal life is very image and metaphor. I see the image, and then it shows itself as a metaphor. So aesthetics, imagery, art is very innate to me. And so then, of course, an oracle deck has an image with each card. And I immediately thought of the artist who beautifully worked with me, Yael Bernhard. I had been familiar with her art for over 20 years. And that's how the idea was birthed.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story. I had no idea that actually your decision to create an oracle deck stemmed from a very practical need. And I love how you concretized what it is that you can offer your clients through this very concrete deck of cards,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
absolutely beautiful. And you're right, the images that are in this deck are so evocative, even without turning over and looking at the words, which are really just poetry. Just looking at the image alone, it creates a whole sensorial experience of what it is that, the message that you need to listen into. I also loved how you talked about how the creative process is actually, it sounds very yin. It's very subtle. It can feel very nebulous, where you have to surrender, when everything can look chaotic and messy. And then you got to sit and come back and center yourself into a place of stillness. So would you be open to sharing, say, an anecdote or a story around some of the maybe challenges that you faced in bringing forth some of the ideas that you wanted to convey? And how did you go about resolving that conundrum?
Well, beautifully, the overarching flow of this project has been very natural and easeful. So I would say that some of the challenges, there were challenges with some of the individual cards, that, how to, so coherence was a card that was particularly challenging to hone in on. What is the concept of coherence that I'm trying to describe? But I also really trusted that I could come back. So the cards that were tricky to write or to bring through I would work on them, I would set them aside, I would come back to them and work on them again, whereas other cards would write themselves very quickly. One of the challenges, and this is very personal to me, is in the collaboration with my beautiful illustrator. She has had, it was coming to an agreement around the business aspect of creating the deck. So she said yes immediately to the project. She was immediately inspired by the project, which was a thrill. And I had thought, my original image was, this will be a collaborative process between two women creating this creation together, bringing it out into the world together, offering it together, and kind of being in it completely together. And the very first phone call I had with her, she immediately made it very clear, yes, I'm happy to illustrate these cards. I'd love to do this project. And how this would work is that you would hire me as an illustrator and pay me per image. So this was, at first, it just seemed like, well, you're just raining on my party. Like, that's no fun. What do you mean? Not to mention, how on earth am I going to come up with the money for this? And I really sat with it. And I mean, I knew without a doubt that she was the right person. And so I really wanted to honor what she needed herself, and where this project was going to take me that I wasn't expecting. And so what ended up happening is we created, I mean, this is a very brass tacks, but it really does, it has to do with creating the right container for the flourishing of our creation and creativity. So it's an interesting thing to understand. We had to create a container of a contract that was very, very clear in terms of permission to use the images, because these are her images. She actually has the copyright, but I have the license to use them, and the payment. And even though I didn't know where the money was going to come from, I wanted to pay her the full price of what she wanted to be paid. As women, we often immediately start negotiating down our value before we've even said the ultimate of what we want, right? So this is another important piece about creativity. So she would say, well, normally I would get paid blah, 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 but I would be willing to take blah, blah, blah. And I said, tell me what you actually, and this is my recollection of it. She may have a different version of the story, but my experience was, tell me exactly what you want to be paid. That is what I'm going to pay you. I don't want you to start cutting corners before we've even agreed on something. And that was very much connected to my sense of the yin, which is that the yin does not like to have her corners cut. She doesn't want to be scrimped on. She wants to be full and lush and abundant. And also, I needed the confidence of being able to ask really everything of Yael in creating this. So if there was any part of her that wasn't feeling fully, honestly compensated for what she was doing, it wasn't going to work. It was going to create a limitation that was artificial. And I didn't want any artificial limitations on this creation. Now, there were real limitations, because every creation needs real limitations. And that's different. So, and ultimately what happened is that once we got those agreements in place, I was hiring her to create these images for my project. Then our collaboration became very free and very balanced, mutually respectful. And at the same time, it was and is my project. And so that gave me, it was true. it's not her project, it's my project. And her work was in service to my vision. And I was bringing on somebody who has an incredible amount of authority. She's incredibly tapped in. I was bringing her expertise in. So there was incredible honoring and respect for her expertise, even as I knew I had the final word on how the project would be completed. So that was really important. And it was, at first I kind of thought, oh, you're raining on my parade, but it was really quite brilliant how it's all, how that relationship has unfolded.
I absolutely love that story because there are so many threads and takeaways that I have here that I want to come back to, that piece around. I mean, first of all, I just want to say, wow, I'm impressed by the integrity with which you approached this collaboration, this creative container. And I also want to point out that, when we talk about creativity, yes, right, there's the feminine that wants to give birth and conceive and all that. But, when we look at the womb, it's a container as well. And oftentimes if we talk about having a balance between our masculine and feminine energies, in your case, I guess you'll be using the language of yang and yin in order to manifest and take action. There needs to be boundaries, a structure, right?
Yes.
And I'm just thinking of that analogy of the river banks. There is so much creativity coming through, so much yin, watery energy that wants to pour forth. But if you don't have these contained riverbanks to structure everything, then it could get really messy and then everything would just spill over. I also want to circle back to this idea of, I think a lot of women will be able to relate, like when we're trying to collaborate or come into relationship really with another woman. I find that oftentimes needs to be a dance. You put it as a negotiation because you have to figure out, well, what is it that the other person wants, to respect that, whilst at the same time being very clear of what it is that you are standing for. I find that in what I consider the term that I use is unhealthy or toxic feminine, there can be a tendency to be very passive aggressive, where on the surface you're like, oh, that's fine, everything's okay. And then at the back, you're just boiling with resentment and bitterness. Yep. And so the directness and also the integrity, first of all, the integrity with which you came into this collaborative container by saying, no, you tell me exactly what it is that you feel you deserve to be paid for, so that there wouldn't be any resentment under the surface, which definitely often tends to happen. And then, as you put it, once the container was very, very clear, once the terms and conditions, so to speak, were that put in place, then the collaboration can be very freeing. I know that, in friendships or in business, if things aren't, or if one party feels that she cannot be forthright and forthcoming in expressing her needs and wants, then it ends up being a very unhappy relationship or partnership. And I feel that in restoring and coming back to the power of the yin, I feel that it's about being firm, assertive, yet soft and gentle. And from hearing your story, I feel that was what emerged from our partnership with Yael, right?
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting, the passive aggressive feminine. And then that passive aggressive feminine tends to feel that she's a victim. Nobody recognizes her, nobody acknowledges her, nobody values her. But the truth is that the first person that has devalued her is herself. Because when we don't state our true needs or our true boundaries, we have betrayed ourselves, and then we project it onto others who they may or may not have any idea. They may be colluding with our devaluing, or they may literally say, well, this is what you told me you want, I'm following what you've asked for. So the first step is to be clear to ourselves and then to say that out loud. And that's something I'm continuing to learn, and it is incredibly powerful. And then we get to soften, because we've created that safe, clear container. We're not still trying to like work in this system or container that doesn't feel secure. So absolutely. Yes.
I love how just how our conversation is turning out to be. You know, we initially started by getting you to share the creative project, how you came to
Mm,
create this set of cards. But I'm also thinking now that it's creation at another level, about creating
mm,
the kind of life that you want, the kind of relationships that you want in your life. And so you talking about, oh, this, I think it happens more often than not, really, because how many of us have been taught to honor our needs? Not very many.
right.
So
Yeah.
this betrayal that you spoke into, you know, if if we really want to empower ourselves and create the life that we desire, relationships,
Mhm.
and really everything is relationships, right? In your career, you have partnerships with people, in relationships with friends, with lovers, right? You also have to set very clear boundaries. It's, as
Mhm.
you say, first and foremost, coming back to yourself and valuing your worth.
Yes.
So I know that, you know, since we're on this tangent on creativity, I want to ask you for your take and your spin on any thoughts and ideas around worth and creativity. And let me set the context of this question by giving let's just use the example of the deck. You know, I'm sure that there are possibly listeners out there who would love to create something, but they might think, oh, but there already are so many of, you know, whatever it is. And there are tons of Oracle decks out there, right? For
Yes.
example,
Yes.
who am I to create this? Will anybody want it? What, you know, is it truly of value? So all these questions,
Mm.
self-doubt. It's really
Mhm.
not believing in your worth, right? That you are of
Mhm.
value, and that you're completely deserving of putting your creative expression out there. What what are your thoughts on this self-doubt that I think a lot of women have?
Well, it's so interesting because I mean, what's inherent in that self-doubt is the looking for outside validation. So, I could have I could have approached actually, this is what I thought I was going to do, was write to publishers and propose my idea for an Oracle deck. And would they basically saying, would you please, engage me in a publishing contract to create this Oracle deck, which I could have tried to do, but or do you think this will sell, or things like that. And and this is the same with teaching as well, or how I decide to put myself out there. Oh, I'm waiting for somebody to, invite me to a weekend retreat. It's like, well, why don't I just put on a weekend retreat, and invite the people that I want to be there at the retreat? And which I've done, I've done with an online event, as you have. And so what I'm saying is, you get to give yourself permission to express yourself however you want to. It's lovely to be invited. It's lovely to be recognized and acknowledged by somebody who's outside of you. There's no question about that, but you don't need to wait for that.
Mm,
You get to say who you are and what you offer, or what you have to give, or you get to create what you're inspired to create. And then the responsibility that comes with that is actually, is what you have created or what you are offering in full alignment? Is it in full alignment with yourself? Is it in full alignment with the people that you wish to serve or connect with? If it's not, that's okay. This is a learning and a refining process. So I would also say the other the other answer to your question is, be willing to fail. Like, be willing for it to be less than perfect. Be willing for it to be a total flop. Be willing to lose money on it. Like, that's a card in the deck, risk. It's one of the yang cards. The risking is what will grow you. The risking will grow your capacity and your trust in yourself. That is the counter to the self-doubt, honestly. And when you fail, realizing it's okay. You didn't die. Maybe some of it was humiliating, but that didn't kill you either, you know? So, and this is really about, being so in love with that impulse inside of you, with the spark of your creativity, with your essence that wants to express itself.
Mm. Yeah. So I'm really just thinking, like if I were somebody listening to this and I was thinking, oh, there has been this dream that has been in an embryonic stage and just wants to come out. Some of the learning takeaways that I have from what you shared is, number one, creativity is really about the process. There's so much like, oh, it's very goal oriented. We can think of it as production, but creation and production is actually different. Creation
Yes.
is that focus on process, enjoying that journey and learning and growing from it. Whereas production, you just want to achieve, you just want to hit the target, and there isn't as much emphasis on that inner journey that a person takes. The other piece that I thought was really interesting was, so along the lines of like not being afraid to fail, that can you really fail if you said yes to yourself?
Right.
The moment you commit and you give yourself that permission, you've already won. It almost doesn't matter what the end result is. And I believe that, yes, the trepidation and the fear and anxiety, I think it may always be there, but there's also so much pleasure and joy that you're going to receive that could then further fuel you, build up your confidence to keep going. And then that final piece, that final thing that you said, what was it? Let me try to remember.
Falling in love with your creative spark, with your desire, with your creative spark, your creative being.
I'm thinking that, like for someone who is just caught up in a lot of fear, because we're all different, and I imagine that we each have our trauma patterns that keep us stuck and trapped and small. I feel that one antidote is to find ways to build up that desire. So instead of pushing yourself like, oh, I should do this, Daven, she has done this, like who am I to just then stay in my small zone of genius? But it's about like magnetizing, drawing to you and pulling to you so that the desire becomes so strong that you just innately flow and get pulled by desire, which I also feel is a very yin quality, right? The yin is magnetic, it draws in. The yang is more like push, let's do this, and there's a lot of struggle in that. But when we can build up the desire and to fuel it, like to find ways that would inspire you, to surround yourself by beautiful either artifacts or objects that remind you of what it is that you desire. I think that's probably one of the reasons why vision boarding is so successful. But I think a lot of people forget, right? When you do a vision board and then you think, oh, they have to take action. I think that sometimes, when you're starting a fire, it takes time. You've got to kindle that flame. And again, I feel that there are so many threads here, but we won't have time to go into this. Next podcast, perhaps, right? Kindling your sexual desire, and enhancing your sexuality. But it takes time. It's actually a slow process, and you have to give yourself that spaciousness. So I imagine that, how long did it take for you to conceive and then eventually birth this deck of cards?
One thing I'm really proud of, Irene, is the idea came and I started working on it right away. And I mean, there was a little bit of a gap of just, will this work with Yael? And I can't even remember why there was a gap, really, maybe of a couple months. But then it just started and it didn't stop. And it was 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. 2 years from the idea to the deck in hand.
I mean, it sounds like you were ready, you were ripe.
I was just ready. And there was no, I mean, what I'm proud of about that is I did trust it completely and I just went for it. And I just had complete faith in it, which was really fun because there are so many ways in which I'll have a strong impulse. And then, I question it for a while. One thing that came to mind when you were talking about, building the capacity to trust yourself and to listen to your desires, to even recognize what your desires are, and the self-confidence, self-faith that it can take time to really grow that in yourself, is to absolutely surround yourself by people who support you and see you and get you. One of the things that I did is I gathered 2 other women together to create a writers group for this project, for this project. They had their own projects. But it was a beautiful little creative container where we supported each other and where we could fail openly and get advice and get guidance and come back again. And that we could trust each other's reflections of each other's work. So I feel community, sisterhood, support, 100% essential in all things, but definitely creative endeavors.
Thank you for sharing that. It comes back to, once again, finding the right container, the right supportive containers for yourself. And I would even go so far as to say that knowing that you are fully deserving of receiving support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Like, I'm just thinking, and it's interesting that you mentioned that you set up this writers group. Currently, I think in my own personal process, I just want to have more creativity, because now with the work that I do, there's a lot of very masculine, planning, organizing, collaborating as well. But I miss the nourishment that creativity gives me. So I'm part of a group where we just meet once a week, once every 2 weeks. And we're working on Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. And it just brings me so much joy to be able to have that container that will support me in exploring and expressing more of my creativity.
Yes. So, not to mention being inspired by the other people in your circle, right? We feed off each other in a beautiful way.
And how nourishing that can be. Yeah. Well, Daven, this has been such a lovely, sweet conversation. Every time I get to talk to you, I always feel that, the conversation just flows so easily. I really enjoyed your share and the insights that you provided and giving us all these sneak peek stories of what your creative process was. I think a lot of people, they often see the product, the end product, right? And they don't get to hear more about like the process and what takes place. Now, it sounds like for you, because of all the work that you've done to nourish your yin, the creative process became a very natural, easeful, I think graceful as well process. And it just speaks to the possibility that we can all aspire to, that's what I feel.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's a beautiful reflection. I appreciate that. Thank you. And our conversations are fabulous. And I'm so excited for what other conversations you'll be bringing to this podcast. So well done birthing this project.
Oh, thank you. So on that note, we'll end here.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and that you'll be taking away nourishing gems to create a more joyful and fulfilling life, because that's what it's all about. If you liked what you heard, do give a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. And I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and let me know your takeaways and reflections. Till next time, remember to light up the world with your beauty and creativity.